Hey guys, welcome to another Tech Me Out video. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate each and every one of you. Today we are going to talk about installing pfSense, and not only that, we are going to install it as a virtual machine on an ESXi 7 server, and we are going to see how actually easy it is. And I've heard throughout the years a lot of people that are almost afraid of doing it. They don't understand how to connect it and how to configure it and how to make everything talk to each other. And really the secret behind installing pfSense virtualized as a virtual machine is to have an ESXi server with more than one physical network adapter, creating two new virtual switches, creating two new virtual port groups on each individual virtual switch, and then create a virtual machine with two network interfaces. And we will see how we can join the network interfaces together, one for ISP and one for LAN, power up the virtual machine, install pfSense, and start configuring it. It's really that easy. If you don't know pfSense, I really think that you should at least do some research about it. It's an open source firewall, but even though it's open source, it doesn't fall short from any other well-known or commercial firewalls like Fortinets and Palo Altos and checkpoints. And I think that in a lot of ways, it's even a lot more robust than my Unify Dream Machine Pro, for example. pfSense was one of the first firewalls I really fell in love with. I ran it myself virtualized for many years before switching to Unify Dream Machine Pro, and I did it in spite of pfSense, not because what pfSense is. I really feel that in some times I really want to go back to using pfSense. So I really think that pfSense is worth a little bit of your time. I really recommend playing with it and see how tremendously powerful pfSense is. So we'll jump to the computer, we'll see how to configure the ESXi servers before launching the install, and we will see that actually there is really nothing to it. So if you haven't done so already, please subscribe. Subscribing really gives us the power and the influence to keep on creating new content. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified when new videos come out. And let's jump over to the computer and see how this is done. Join me. Alright guys, so we are at the computer, and before we start installing pfSense and mount the ISO and go through the installation wizard, we need to make sure that our virtual infrastructure is all set up. We have more than one physical network interfaces in our ESXi server, And now, before we do anything else, we need to make sure that the ESXi server itself knows what to do with those physical network interfaces. And we need to make sure that one interface is connected to our ISP modem and the other to our network switch, and then all our devices will be connected to that switch. Much like any other router on the market has one port that's dedicated to WAN, and the others are for LAN, and they're labeled this way. This is exactly what we are going to do with our ESXi server. We're going to create virtual switches, assign network interfaces to them, and then we're going to use them properly in our installation. So let's go right ahead and dive into our virtual environment. I am using vCenter version 7 and two ESXi hosts that are both ESXi version 7. We are going to pick one of them, and we're going to start our journey by going to the Configure tab, Virtual Switches right here, and clicking on Add Networking. what we want to do is to create a new virtual interface and then assign a physical interface to it. So this process starts by creating virtual machine port group for a standard switch. Click on Next. New standard switch. Click on Next. And we'll choose an adapter. Let's choose VMNIC 0 for that matter. And we'll click on Next. Let's name this virtual switch so we'll know what it represents. ISP. This will be the name of the port group. And click on Finish. We'll need to repeat this process one more time. I'm of course ignoring all my current networking, virtual adapters and virtual port groups. I'm ignoring all that. I'm creating a whole new environment that will be the ISP right here, and another one that will be, let's call it our new standard switch, of course. Add our remaining virtual physical interface, sorry, and we'll name this port group, let's say pfLAN. Alright, so we'll know to identify it. That's it. Our let's say infrastructure preparation is ready, and now we will be able to take a virtual machine, of course create it, assign two network interfaces to it. One will be the WAN and one will be the LAN. This is exactly the kind of thing that we have enabled right now. Of course, this is a lab environment. I have nothing plugged in to these virtual interfaces. We will of course use another networking infrastructure, but the process remains exactly the same. This is what you will need to do in your environment. So, after we created the virtual interfaces and in the process new virtual port groups, you will have, of course, to connect the ISP to wherever it's connected, and your network switch to the other interface. And now we can go and create a new virtual machine. Of course, let me step back. You will need to download pfSense. And this is a very basic Googling work, just searching pfSense, going to the website, clicking on download, click on the latest version. The architecture will be AMD 64-bit and the installer will be CD image ISO. This is what we want to import into our ESXi data store. So we'll have the option to mount it into our virtual DVD drive. That's of course a basic setup. I'm not going to elaborate on that. It's really just downloading an ISO. That's all there is to it. I've already done it, so I don't want to waste time on that. Let's go and create a new virtual machine. Click on Next. Let's give it a name. Sorry, pfSense, that's great. Let's give it a data store to live on. And now we'll need to choose Other in the OS family, and we'll need to choose FreeBSD 11 64-bit. That's what works for me. And now, here is something that I noticed a lot of people having trouble with. Creating the virtual machine, I'm gonna give it 2 CPU and 2 GB of memory. I always used to give it 16 GB of hard drive, and I'm always using thin provisioning. And now, in the network area, the first thing we need to do is to add a network adapter. We have 2 network adapters, one is ISP and one is LAN. So, I'm going to assume this network interface will be my ISP uplink. So I'm going to choose ISP right here. And my LAN interface, I'm going to assign it with a pfLAN we gave it before. So now I have 2 network interfaces. All I have to to do now is to mount the ISO. Alright, great. Don't forget to tick this checkbox, or otherwise it's as if we didn't mount the ISO. And we're ready to click on next. Right before I go to the next step, I want to make sure we all understand what we did so far. We took an ESXi server with more than one physical network interface. We've created a new virtual switch for each one of those these physical interfaces, and then we created a port group for each of the new virtual switches. One is ISP, one is LAN. That's all we did up until this moment. We've created a new virtual machine with two network interfaces. One is for the new ISP port group and one connected to the new LAN port group. And now we're ready to power on the virtual machine. We'll click on finish. We'll click on power on, and we will launch the installation wizard. Now, this is what you are probably going to see in your screen. I'm going to have to cheat in this video because I really don't have anything connected to the physical suite, to the physical network interfaces that we just configured. So after the installation finishes, I am going to connect this virtual machine to my to my existing network infrastructure, but the process remains the same exactly. So we'll click accept. We'll click on install. We'll click on enter. For me, at least, I'm using UFS enter. The installation process is starting. Almost zero complex networking configurations. Of course, once the installation is finished and we have the network infrastructure up and running, then pfSense is very robust and a lot of advanced configuration can be done. We will, of course, dive into it way later, maybe in this video, maybe in future videos. But for now, as you see, the installation process is very straightforward. And now I'm clicking on no, I don't want to do any manual configurations. Something is probably something happened, I don't know why, but as you can see, even in this process, even if you would just go and do a hard reboot, it would be just fine. And now pfSense is finished. The installation, and the first boot can take some time because until it identifies the DHCP, if it's already connected to a network, it pulls all the network information, and it can take, I don't know, 2, even 5 minutes. Our interfaces are not connected to anything, so it took a little less time. But this is the next step of our process. That we want to set of VLANs. I'm going to click on no, and now we need to choose which interface is connected to our ISP and which interface is connected to our LAN. And what pfSense is asking us right now is which of your interfaces is connected to the WAN. And all we see in the screen is the name of the virtual interfaces, and it's VMX0 and VMX1, their MAC addresses, and we don't really have their names. We don't see ISP or PFLAN, and we need to decide based on the MAC address which is which. So what we are going to do, we are going to switch back to our vCenter server, go into the virtual machine, and actually we can see it even here, I think. Yeah. The ISP network interface, I can say that it ends with A2. So the network interface that ends with A2 is VMX0. That's great. That means that actually I don't need to change anything. I'm going to type VMX 0. And which is connected to our LAN? That's the next question. Next question, there's no other choice, VMX1. Sorry, VMX1. That's correct. And now pfSense is going to do its thing and configure things based on our configurations. This also can take anywhere from 2-3 minutes to even 5, 6, and 10 minutes. So I'm going to pause the recording right here and I'm going to resume it once this step is done. Alright guys, so the initial configuration of pfSense is finished. I actually had to cheat during this pause and connect the WAN interface into one of my real live VLANs in my home lab. And this is why you see in the WAN, the IP address is an internal address. It's not really connected to an ISP. It's as if the pfSense is one of my network clients connected to any one of my switches. So in order to get things going, what I like to do is click on two in this menu that you see right here. It's set interface IP addresses, because I want to set the LAN IP address to something like 10.100.100.1. That's the subnet I want to use internally with my pfSense, and I want to use a 24-bit subnet mask. Click on enter, and now pfSense asks me if I want to turn on the HCP server. Actually, I will turn it on. The start address, I always leave a few addresses in the beginning of the subnet and a few at the end. So my beginning address will be 10.100.100.10, and the end of the range will be 10.100.100.200 for that matter. Let's click on yes. That's great. So now, as long as we have a virtual machine right now connected to our pfLAN port group that we've created, we will go to 10.100.100.1 and we will get the pfSense web interface. If you don't believe me, let's see. I have this test virtual machine I always use for several purposes. Sorry, let's refresh. Oh, it's on a different ESXI server. I'm going to pause the recording right now. I'm going to migrate this virtual machine to the ESXI server that has the new virtual switches that we've just created, and then I'm going to connect it to the pfLAN, and we'll see that everything is working and we can start configuring pfSense. Join me in a second. All right, so the virtual machine was vmotioned to the ESXi server that we have configured, and now we are ready to connect it to the pfLAN port group. Let's open up a remote console to this virtual machine. All right, let's open a new browser window. All right, so we have a new browser window. We can now safely go to 10.100.100.1 and voila, we have the pfSense web interface. And if I recall correctly, the username is admin and the password is pfSense by default. That's correct. Let's go ahead and click on next, host name. If you want to change it, that's fine. Local domain, again, I'm always in my production environments, I do change the host name and domain, but for now we can not bother with it. Let's give it DNS servers. I don't want the DNS servers to be overwritten by my ISP's DNS servers. I like Google and Cloudflare better. Let's set the time zone if it's relevant. If not, click on next. Now it's asking us, how do we connect to the internet? In this specific case, it's DHCP. If you have, for example, DSL connection, you will click on PPOE and supply your username and password. For us, DHCP is great. Click on next. LAN IP address, that's what we've configured, that's fine. And now we need to change the admin password. Let's change it. Click on reload. And that's it. pfSense is now installed, it's configured, it's alive because we're just looking at its user interface. And now all we have to do is to start configuring it and create firewall rules and create VLANs. And of course, these are all topics that that we will touch and we will configure. But for now, just to make sure, let's do a small sanity check. Let's open up a command prompt and let's try to ping 8.8.8. That's great. We have a connection. Let's see that we are also resolving. Let's ping www.google.com. Oh, I fat fingered it. And as we can see, our connection is up. We are truly and physically connected to the internet. On the one side on the ISP, on the second side on our LAN. And this is exactly what we'll need to do. Let's click on firewall rules just to see this section. Of course, on what we're interested in is the LAN. The default rules are the ones that allow traffic to go out, for example, to get internet connectivity. When we'll dive deeper into how to configure pfSense, we will have many VLANs right here. So we will have a lot of firewall rules, but this is the first step, the very first step on how to configure pfSense on an ESXi environment. All right, so the last step that I consider to be part of the installation process, or at least post-installation process, we are running this pfSense instance as a VMware virtual machine. And as a VMware virtual machine, it needs VMware tools in order to communicate with the host. And the way we install VMware tools in pfSense is we go to System and Package Manager, and we go to the Available Packages tab. And you can even sort this by searching for Tools and install Open VM Tools. Click on Install. We will let the installation complete. It's a really fast and snappy installation. Actually, it's already done. And if we go back to our vCenter server, we will see that VMware tools are already running. But what I like to do whenever I install VMware tools, I just close this window, close this virtual machine window even, and give the pfSense virtual machine, not the Windows 10 virtual machine, but the pfSense virtual machine, I give it a quick reboot. And then, at least for me, in my opinion, the installation process is complete. And now we can move to the configuration, VLANs, snort, firewall rules, port forwarding, etc., etc. Now we are really done with the installation. So guys, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and hit the bell icon so you will be notified when new videos come out. Click the like button, and of course, I want to hear your feedbacks, your comments. Let me know in the comment section below if I did something wrong, maybe I forgot something, maybe you have another way to do things, maybe better. Please let me know in the comment section. I would love to hear your feedback. And until next time, please go ahead, start up your ESXi server, install pfSense. I've used it for many years. I love it before switching to Unify Dream Machine Pro. I urge you, take a chance, try pfSense. You will not be sorry. Join me again in the next video. Bye bye.